Blatantlybookish. I'm Marissa, and today I'm really excited to share with you something that I would like to do in the month of March, and that is called March Madness. So this actually has nothing to do with basketball. I am not a sports fan at all, but while everyone else is making their basketball March Madness brackets, I will be reading about madness and mental illness in novels and nonfiction and books in general. So I'm really excited to make this announcement, and I hope that you will join me as well as Laura from Nargle and Acacia from Acacia Ives in focusing on madness and mental illness in popular culture and especially books during the month of March. So mental illness is something that I feel particularly passionate about as a topic. It is something that has personally affected me. So mental illness is something that I personally feel very passionate about. I think it's important for everyone to have a better understanding of mental illness, and I think that through reading books about madness and mental illness and those concepts in our society, it can expose some of the stigmatism that surrounds the topic in today's culture, as well as some of the history of madness and mental illness. Where do some of these preconceived notions come from, and what can we do to help people who are struggling from mental illness, and what can we do to combat these stigmas and the way that people view mental illness in our society today. So I'm going to start us off with some recommendations, personal recommendations for books that deal with mental illness and have made a great impact in my life. The first book I would like to talk about is The Virgin Suicides. This may be an obvious choice. It has suicide in the title. It is a story of a 1970s suburban Michigan family with 5 daughters. And the book starts out with an ambulance arriving for the body of one of the daughters and a group of boys who recall the events leading up to her death. It's a fascinating book about suicide and isolation and the ways in which tragic events affect communities. But yes, The Virgin Suicides actually does a fantastic job of viewing mental illness from an outsider's perspective, which I think is particularly interesting. Another book that I'd like to recommend is Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. Now, this book is something that I'm sure you've heard of before. It features Holden Caulfield, who is the ultimate symbol of teenage angst and rebellion. This book is mainly about Holden as a character and his sense of loss and depression that he experiences and struggles with. And this book is one of the most polarizing books that I've ever heard of. I feel like people either love it or hate it, but either way, I feel like everyone should read it at least once. The next book is one that I also associate with The Catcher in the Rye for, I'm not really sure what reason, perhaps because I read them both in high school, but maybe there's something more to it, I'm not sure, but that is The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. It's about the slow mental breakdown of Esther Greenwood. It's a depressingly beautiful book about expectations of females in society and the stigma and treatment of mental illness. And I think about passages of this book even years after reading it, specifically the bell jar metaphor as a metaphor for depression and that sort of stifled feeling that one experiences. I think if you're interested in mental illness or in feminism, that this book is really just a must read. So the next book is kind of an obvious one for me if you know me and have seen my videos, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, as well as Wide Sargasso Sea by Jean Rhys. Now, Jane Eyre obviously is not all about mental illness. There's so much more to that book, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it. But it does center around mental illness in some way, shape, or form, specifically the trope of the mad woman in the attic. And Wide Sargasso Sea, of course, is a derivative of Jane Eyre. It's a more modern adaptation, in a sense, of a specific character who we don't learn too much about in Jane Eyre, and it expands the concept of the mad woman in the attic, dealing with post-colonial issues as well. So this is an interesting intersection about race, gender, and mental illness. And the last book that I'd like to recommend right now is The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman. It's actually a short story, not a whole book, but it's about a Victorian woman who is diagnosed with hysteria and put on the rest cure. So she is trapped in her bed and she starts seeing a woman inside her yellow wallpaper. And it's just the story of the character's descent into madness, and it's generally seen as a great feminist text as well. Actually, I'm noticing that pretty much all of these books that I'm recommending have to do with the intersection of feminism and mental illness, and sort of the idea behind female hysteria. That's something that I'm just fascinated about. There are plenty of other books out there that don't deal with that aspect of mental illness, but I guess that is the specific aspect I'm recommending to you today. Another book I've heard of that deals with mental illness is A Tale for the Time Being by Ruth Ozeki. Now this one I haven't read yet, but really would like to. I don't know much about it. I think that it has to do with letters in bottles that wash up ashore or something like that, a 104-year-old Zen Buddhist nun, and something about Japan. So that is all I know about it right now, but I look forward to learning a lot more when I read it with Laura this month. And if you guys would like to participate in this read-along, please let me know in the comments down below, and hopefully you can read this with us. If you haven't already, I heard that everyone should read it at least once in their lives. If you guys are as excited about March Madness as I am, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments down below. What will you be reading for March Madness? Are there any particular books about madness or mental illness that you really can't wait to pick up, or that you would recommend to me personally? I'd love to know, and I look forward to seeing you in another video soon. Bye!